Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we have a monumental occasion to pre-celebrate, but we're going to be celebrating the forecasted overturn of Roe v. Wade. The forecasted overturn of Roe v. Wade, this comes from a leaked draft of the majority opinion that was penned by Alito. And Alito is the second best justice on the Supreme Court. Samuel Alito is the second best justice. I don't think it's close. I think the Trump justices are vying for third, fourth, and fifth place. And Clarence Thomas is number one. Alito is number two. And we're going to be looking at the majority opinion draft that Alito wrote. And this is dated February, so obviously it's not that recent, but it is a roadmap to what the court will ultimately determine, or so we can gather. Now, there are a lot of speculations that this draft, this leak of the majority opinion that got into the hands of Politico was meant to incite a weak judge, so Brett Kavanaugh, to side with the liberals or to back down from overturning Roe v. Wade by disrupting the coalition of judges that are ready to overturn Roe v. Wade. It does look like it's a 5-4 decision, which is the optimal case, is that it's a 5-4 decision with Justice Roberts far away from the writing of the draft. So it's good that we got some justices that are willing to overturn Roe and Casey. These were some of the most disastrous decisions in American Supreme Court history, and believe me, there are a lot of those disastrous decisions out there. In fact, no organization, no institution has done more damage to our liberties than the Supreme Court. It's not even close. The Supreme Court has done more damage to the Constitution than any law, any president, any Congress, or governor. It's not even close. So, with that said, let's dive into this majority opinion. And it is believed that the 5 justices are Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, as I had trouble remembering his name. So let's read this opinion. But first, don't forget to like the channel. Also subscribe to the video, because I got that backwards. And if you really like Evangelical Dark Web, you can become a Patreon-like supporter over at evangelicaldarkweb.org. So, going into the opinion, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more because it's a little blurry. At the time of Roe, 30 states still prohibited abortion at all stages. In the years prior to that decision, about a third of states had liberalized their laws, but Roe abruptly ended that political process. It imposed the same highly restricted regime on the entire nation, and it effectively struck down the abortion laws of every single state. As Justice Byron White aptly put it in his dissent, the decision represented the exercise of raw judicial power, and it sparked a national controversy that has embittered our political culture for a half century. I'm going to scroll down. I will be using the annotated notes from Politico because they're pretty good highlights of what is in this ruling. They're not all the good highlights, but this is a 98-page ruling. And this video is not meant to go for 98 minutes. So, with that said, we will be focusing on some of the highlights, and we got some pretty good highlights. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one which the defenders of Roe and Casey now chiefly rely. The Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, that provision has been held to guarantee some rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, but any such right must be deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. The right to an abortion does not fall within this category. Until the latter part of the 20th century, such a right was entirely unknown in American law. Indeed, the 14th Amendment was adopted. 3/4 of the states made abortion a crime in all stages of pregnancy. The abortion right is so critically different than any other right that this court has held to fall within the 14th Amendment's protection of liberty. Roe's defenders characterized the abortion right as similar to the rights recognized in past decisions involving matters such as intimate sexual relations, contraception, and marriage, but abortion is fundamentally different, as both Roe and Casey acknowledged, because it destroys what those decisions call fetal life, and what the law now before us describes as an unborn human being. Stare decisis, the doctrine of which Casey's controlling opinion was based, does not compel unending adherence to Roe's abuse of judicial authority. That's base right there. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed the debate and deepened divisions. It's time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in our democracy, by the citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting. So, as you can see, general gist of the decision is that the states will have the ultimate power over this issue. Perhaps the federal government, but I think it's more implied the states. So let's just scroll down. That was a very good piece of the pie there. It does. He gets a lot into common law. He gets a lot into. There's a lot of past decisions criticized. I would observe. The inescapable conclusion is that a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition. On the contrary, an unbroken tradition of prohibiting abortion on pain of criminal punishment persisted from the earliest days of the common law until 1973. The court in Roe could have said of abortion exactly what Glucksberg said of assisted suicide. Attitudes towards abortion have changed since Bracton, but our laws have consistently condemned and continue to prohibit that practice. So again, he goes back to English common law, stating that abortion was never a right in English common law. Ordered liberty sets limits and defines the boundaries between competing interests. Roe and Casey each struck a particular balance between the interest of a woman who wants an abortion and the interest of what they termed potential life. But the people of various states may evaluate those interests differently. In some states, voters may believe that the abortion right should be more extensive than the right that Roe and Casey recognize. Voters in other states may wish to impose tight restrictions based off their belief that abortion destroys an unborn human being. Our nation's historical understanding of ordered liberty does not prevent the people's elected representatives from deciding how abortion should be regulated. Nor does the right to obtain an abortion have sound basis in precedent. Casey relies solely on the right to marry a person of a different race, Loving versus Virginia, the right to marry while in prison, the right to obtain contraceptives, the right to reside with relatives, the right to make the decision about education of one's children, the right to not be sterilized without consent, and the right to right in certain circumstances not undergo involuntary surgery, forced administration of drugs, or other substantially similar procedures. That's just a footnote there. I thought it was an interesting footnote. And just back on the stare decisis issue, which means precedent in layman's terms, we have long recognized, however, that stare decisis is not an inexorable command. And it is the weakest when we interpret the Constitution. It has been said that it is sometimes more important that an issue be settled than it be settled right. But when it comes to interpretation of the Constitution, the great charter of our liberties, which was meant to endure through a long lapse of ages, we place a high value on having the matter settled right. In addition, when we place our constitutional decision, when one of our constitutional decisions goes astray, the country is usually stuck with the bad decision unless we correct our own mistake. An erroneous constitutional decision can be fixed by amending the Constitution, but our Constitution is notoriously hard to amend. Therefore, in appropriate circumstances, we must be willing to reconsider and, if necessary, overrule the constitutional decisions. Some of the most important constitutional decisions we have overruled prior precedents. We mentioned 3. In Brown versus Board of Education, the court repudiated separate but equal doctrine, which allowed states to maintain racially segregated schools and other facilities. In doing so, the court overruled the infamous decision of Plessy versus Ferguson, along with 6 other Supreme Court precedents that had applied the separate but equal rule. In West Coast Hotel versus Parrish, the court overruled Atkins versus Children's Hospital of D.C., which held that the law setting minimum wages for women violated the liberty protected by the Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause. West Coast Hotel signaled the demise of an entire line of important precedents that protected an individual's liberty right against the state and federal health and welfare legislation, holding invalid a law setting maximum working hours. And there's another court case met. Finally, in West Virginia, Board of Ed versus Barnett, after a lapse of only 3 years, the court overruled Minnersville School District versus Gobitis, and held that public school students could not be compelled to salute the flag in violation of their sincere beliefs. Barnett stands out because nothing had changed during the intervening period other than the court's belated recognition that its earlier decision had been seriously wrong. On many other occasions, this court has overruled important constitutional decisions. So, and here's another highlight. I don't know how many more highlights I want to read. Roe was a collision course with the Constitution from the day it was decided, and Casey perpetuated its errors. And the errors do not concern some arcane corner of the law of little importance to the American people, rather wielding nothing but raw judicial power. That's that quote from the beginning. The court usurped the power to address a question of profound moral and social importance that the Constitution unequivocally leaves for the people. Casey describes itself as calling both sides of a national controversy to resolve their debate, but in doing so, Casey necessarily decides a winning side. Those on the losing side, those who sought to advance the state's interest in fetal life, could no longer seek to persuade their elected representatives to adopt policies consistent with their views. The court short-circuited the democratic process by closing it to the large number of Americans who dissented in any respect from Roe. Roe fanned into life an issue that has inflamed our national politics in general and has obscured with its smoke the selection of justices to this court in particular ever since. So, again, I like what I read. So, let's hop back to, again, this is the evangelical dark web. So let's talk about evangelicals and their pre-response, because that's how they should be evaluated. Not the fact that they're hopping on a bandwagon now, but were they on our side when we were advancing legislation like the Mississippi law, the Texas law, the Idaho law, all these other anti-abortion laws? Because it turns out the fastest way to end or overturn Roe v. Wade, the fastest way to end abortion in America, turns out to be electing more Republicans. The irony. Elect more Republicans and you can overturn Roe v. Wade. That finally happened. The other thing that happened was Gen X politicians, Gen X pro-lifers actually advanced the pro-life cause, because when they were elected, they decided we're actually going to challenge Roe v. Wade. Because Roe v. Wade, prior to this court case, had not been challenged in my lifetime. Or at least by the Supreme Court. It was challenged by laws that actually sought to challenge Roe v. Wade. So, again, over the weekend, Tim Keller was talking about, we don't exactly know the fastest way to end abortion. He was doing that thing. He was promoting his third wayism. Because, again, Tim Keller's entire ministry is built off syncretism. Or syncretism. Russell Moore, another terrible pro-life activist. Karen Swallow Pryor, another terrible pro-life activist. It's, and all these never-Trumpers who are terrible pro-life activists. It turns out that electing Trump accomplished the fantasy that we had in our heads, that we could just get over Roe v. Wade, overturn Roe v. Wade via taking over the Supreme Court. And it took several tries to accomplish this, because Democrats are batting 1,000 when it comes to their justices, as far as I can tell. And Republicans are batting closer to 50%. So we need like twice the appointments to the Supreme Court in order to get it right. And that's what it took. Because, we elected mistakes along the way, like Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy. Wow. Who am I thinking? John Roberts, obviously. And here I was thinking that Trump appointed a few more mistakes to the Supreme Court. But as it turns out, there might be 5 votes for a Roe v. Wade overturn. And if there's 5 votes for that, that means that I'm not sure what the rules are with the Supreme Court. And if Justice wants to tag along as a 6th vote, but they have a majority that want to overturn Roe, I don't know what the rules are. Could he just, because he's outvoted and he doesn't actually hold a majority opinion? I don't know. So maybe the play here was to leak the documents so that one of the justices would flip and they would lose a 5-justice coalition to end Roe v. Wade. But you got to know, if you're going to the Supreme Court, you already have a position on Roe v. Wade. You already have a position. Let's not pretend like this is really a legal case. Obviously, they're speaking the legal language here. Obviously, Alito is speaking legalese here. But let's be realistic. Supreme Court justices are politicians. That's what they are. John Roberts is the most blatant example of a politician on the bench who wants to weigh both sides and appear as the adult in the room, but he's really the weakest man or character on that Supreme Court. He is the weakest character, the lowest integrity. So we should look at this as a forecast for what is coming, and that's good news. I think this is very good news. Because like I said, I've said this in the past, I'll say it again. If if Roe v. Wade is overturned, that'll have a massive cultural shift on our country. Our culture will have an overnight shift because majority of people have no agency. They are sheep. They will just go along with the flow. So just like how the Obergefell decision made a majority of the country pro homosexuality overnight, this decision will make everyone pro-life or majority pro-life overnight. They will agree with the decision because they are told, because it is the official narrative. That's why they will agree with the decision. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And that much agreement that the NPCs, some of the NPCs won't be our NPCs, will have a benefit to our culture. So that's really all I got to say about that. Take the win, celebrate the win. I'll certainly celebrate the win tonight. And have a blessed day. I will catch you on the next one.